Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Academics Anonymous podcast. And my name is Miguel. I'll be your host today. I wanted to deviate from the series of episodes that we're coming out with regarding hurdles in healthcare to address a recent issue in healthcare and in academia in general. Over the past couple of months, there's been significant calls to address misinformation as published by multiple news sources and even the Lancet in the January 18th issue of the journal mentioned that Meta has changed its fact-checking policy. So I thought that this would be an interesting thing that we could bring up and make as the topic for this episode. So one of the things I wanted to discuss specifically was the issue of predatory publishing. And predatory publishing is a term that was coined by Jeffrey Beal, a librarian from the University of Colorado in Denver. And they coined the term to refer to organizations that publish counterfeit journals to exploit the open access model in which the author pays. These predatory publishers are dishonest and lack transparency. And they aim to dupe researchers, especially those inexperienced in scholarly communication. And I'd like to just address this issue because it has to pertain to academic research, which is a central part of this podcast mission. And it will also improve an understanding, hopefully, of the kinds of resources that we should be looking to receive our information. So to start, I'd like to explain how academic journal works. So for career publishers, it's very important to publish their studies. So if they are conducting some form of research, they want to be able to publish that study in something like an academic journal. So some examples of reputable publishing companies include the New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, and the Journal of the American Medical Association. And just like any other businesses, these publishing companies have to create a business model to be able to make money. While most of the revenue is likely collected from subscriptions that people pay towards the journal to be able to access these articles, many of them also charge a publishing fee to authors to publish in that specific journal. And this model was established when print was the primary form of receiving research information. However, the birth of the internet has changed many things for publishing companies, and this includes the creation of new companies and competitors. As a result of this increase in new competition, some of the other existing journals decided that they needed to pump out more papers and more issues more frequently. But it also meant that they had to increase the cost of subscription services for publishing companies so that they can finance to be able to increase the output of these journals, hence the start of the open access movement. So I want to define this term, open access. It's one that we're going to be using a little bit this episode. So open access is defined by Stanford's Lane Medical Library website, includes a set of principles and a set of principles and practices through which research outputs, like journal articles, are distributed online, free of cost or other access barriers. So in agreement with this mission, many authors started to look to open access websites for publishing their studies. This is where the issue began for many authors. So several newer publishing companies were made and asked for large sums of money for researchers to publish their studies. And these companies would circumvent the typical publishing protocol to maximize their profit margins while jeopardizing the integrity of their published pieces. So for a typical publishing company, the subscribers will be the ones that will bear the grunt of the majority of the cost. Now, if you have a journal article and you are the person that's publishing it, sometimes you may also be asked to pay a publishing fee. And that's something that's very common in all forms of academia. However, some of these open access journals, because they don't require subscribers to pay a fee, they have to rely on the money that they're receiving from authors. And this is a practice that's relatively new due to the introduction of the internet. However, some of these companies are now exploiting authors, asking them for huge sums of money. They publish their paper, but they don't do the things that they state they do. Some things like reviewing the articles. Those are very important and essential steps that have to be done to verify the validity of these articles. And there have been multiple instances where open access journals have published articles that don't have highly substantiated information that is not very repeatable. One example of this was brought up in a TEDx NC State TED Talk by scientist Bradley Alf. He talks about an example that occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. During this period, many researchers were publishing papers regarding the virus, and new information was coming out every day. At one point, there was a paper published in the Journal of Biological Regulators and Homeostatic Agents that stated 5G waves and radio towers were partially responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it is not possible for things like radio waves to create a virus. So this is something that was highly fictitious. Now, while this is an extreme example of articles that have been published in open access journals, there are also instances where subscription journals have published destructive articles as well. There is a case series that was published by Andrew Wakefield in the Lancet in 1998 that linked autism to the MMR vaccine. And now that is breeding lots of animosity towards vaccines, justly. And later on down the line, the Lancet ended up retracting that article, but it doesn't reverse the irreparable damage and harm that did to the credibility of vaccines. So there's certainly things that have been messed up on both sides. But the point to this episode is to start a conversation about the legitimacy of some research. While we may be inclined to believe any study published in an academic space, it's also important to substantiate the scientific claims that we make and the scientific claims that are made in academia with multiple sources, multiple publications taken from reputable sources. Some of the ways that we can identify these predatory journals include finding spelling or grammatical errors. That kind of shows us that these articles haven't been peer reviewed. That would typically not show up in something that has been peer reviewed. Clearly stating the review process on the website is something that you should look for. And most often you will see that those that are reputable will have some form of review process that is elucidated on their website. If we ever are publishing a journal, want to make sure that there is a clear publishing fee that is stated. And that is something that is very important for people that are looking to publish in an academic journal. So for this episode, I went ahead and used multiple different forms of media. I used TED Talks. I used some articles. I wanted to give you the plethora of information that I pulled this from. And that way you all can make some decisions of your own about what kind of information you want to trust. So all that will be linked down in the description of this episode. But that will be it for me today. Leave a comment with anything that you'd like to ask or things that you thought were important to extract from this episode down in the comment section below. And leave a like, subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.